England footballers are booed by their own fans as they take a knee. There are pleas for the anti-racism gesture to be respected with the Euros about to start. In cricket, an England Test debutant apologises as old racist and sexist tweets are uncovered.
I want to make it clear that I'm not racist and I'm not sexist. I deeply regret my actions and I'm ashamed of making such remarks.
Why didn't cricket bosses spot the tweets before selecting Ollie Robinson? Now he's been investigated by the ECB. Also this week, there's turmoil in South America with the Copa America's late hosting change. Plus, we'll explore the fallout from Naomi Osaka's withdrawal from the French Open and ask a special guest about her decision not to speak to the media. Hello and welcome to the podcast digesting the week's sports news with interviews and analysis. Welcome to episode 21 of Sport Unlocked. I'm Rob Harris from the Associated Press, and later we're joined by one of the greats of sports news, Charlie Sale, to hear about his new book and get some career reflections too. Well, alongside me as ever throughout is Martyn Ziegler from The Times.
Yes, good to be with you again, Rob, and with us we have Tariq, Panja of the New York Times. And guys, you've been in Porto, you've come back, you've had tests to plenty, but you're still not having to isolate quite yet, but there's a risk you may have to do so.
Yeah, well, we're probably some of the most tested people in Britain at the moment, but there is a chance, as you said, that we might have to self-isolate. There's reports that 6 planes back from Portugal after that Champions League final, passengers and all of those, Chelsea fans and Manchester City fans have had to isolate after passengers on those planes tested positive. And this was the worry among the Portuguese citizenry about holding this game, that the coronavirus could spread over there. Instead, as a load of British tourists are bringing it back into the UK. The British government has put Portugal, which was on the green list, one of the few countries on the green list, safe to travel without having to isolate, onto the amber list. And it just shows how fast-moving all this travel is. Rob, how have you found it?
It was interesting sort of getting the green travel experience, the fact you need to get a PCR test to go out there. Then when we were out there, we needed another test to be able to get into the game itself because we'd been out in Portugal a few days. And then we needed to get another lateral flow test to leave the country, something that I actually found in a more rural town because I spent a couple of days extra out in Portugal, and then I was trying to find a way of getting tested. And then you have to get a PCR test 2 days after you get back as well.
One thing I noticed at the game, and we're going to maybe see this at the Euros where we're going to have fans once that tournament kicks off, is the social distancing rules get thrown out the window, I suppose, once you're in the stadium. At the end of the final there, when the Chelsea fans were parading around the trophy, and you can't blame the fans as well, one of the most exciting days of their lives, the team have come over to their end of the field to show them the trophy and to celebrate with them. They all bundled together towards the front of the terrace there, the end of the stadium in Porto, and there was a forlorn stadium announcement, repeatedly saying, "Can you please maintain social distancing and keep your masks on, etc." That just did not happen, and I think that's something we're going to see in the Euros, despite probably the best efforts from the organisers. What effect that has on the risk of spreading the coronavirus further, that's to be seen.
I mean, it was interesting getting some more insight into why the game couldn't be played at Wembley, and obviously we'll be seeing the fact the Euros have games at Wembley from June the 13th. So the suggestion was, could you have just moved forward those regulations and exemptions a couple of weeks to enable the Champions League finals to be there? But actually, it turns out some of the more relaxed restrictions for the Euros that UEFA has secured aren't actually going to potentially kick in until later in June, after the nominal June 21st Freedom Day. So it would not be a case of just accelerating those exemptions being in place for the Champions League final to be staged at Wembley. So it presented the necessity of having to take it to Portugal because UEFA wouldn't even perhaps have been able to get all their staff even out to London for a game at Wembley.
The Euros is obviously going to be interesting into how it deals with the whole COVID issue. And also, as we've seen this week, it's going to be, I think, some pretty tricky situation for the England football team and the Football Association, and because what we've seen this week are England football fans significant numbers of them actually booing players taking the knee, and I think this is going to be an ongoing issue for the next 6 weeks. What do you think? Because it's a sort of it's a difficult one because you can't ban fans from booing, can you? But it's not particularly good for the team. B, it doesn't look very good from the supporters' point of view if you're booing what is basically a demonstration in favour of equal rights.
And we can take a listen now to that booing that took place before England's game against Austria on Wednesday night when the players took a knee.
It wasn't everyone, but it was a large section of the crowd was booing, and perhaps an even larger section drowned them out with applause a little bit after. But it was very clear and quite surprising. The thing is, what the players, there's been some fans groups or opponents to this who've said, well, we're not opposing the players. We support equal rights, but bringing all sorts of questions about Marxism, God knows what else. But as far as the players see it, this is a demonstration for them to protest in support of equal opportunity, anti-racism, and nothing more than that. And I think the fans should be taking them at their word. I mean, the England team has been one of the most diverse sports teams on the planet for years, and the fact that a section, a sizable minority, can't support the players when they're doing this is going to cause a lot of uncertainty within that squad. Are the fans with them?
I think it only has to be interpreted as a racist act because this is the first England game with fans since November 2019. We've had players taking a knee now for a year. We had the games towards the end of the season that had fans. A lot of focus on the fact that there was booing of taking a knee. So it's clear what it means to drown out the clear anti-racism gesture with jeering. And it's incredible. The fact is, this is meant to be the nation coming together for the Euros, a multicultural team, and what they're doing supporting England and in the stadium. What help is it showing the team if they're actually just going to do that?
Rob, this happened at the Champions League final as well, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. Obviously, the Chelsea fans were closer to us, so it's certainly those that we could hear booing, taking a knee. Obviously, the City fans were further away. And that was very audible around the world.
I mean, I think you have to accept that historically, England football fans have been a large section of them, maybe a large minority of them, have been on the sort of that spectrum. I mean, singing "No Surrender to the IRA." I think if you're the sort of person who sings "No Surrender to the IRA," then you will probably be booing taking a knee, and that's one of the ongoing things that the England football team and the Football Association have to either deal with or accept, is that there is this group of England supporters who are of that spectrum, and it's it's not too long ago since the 1980s and the 1970s and in the early 90s when that same spectrum of football fan was actually doing blatantly racist stuff. So it's probably a thing which has developed over time to be slightly less obvious, but there's still an innate right wing. I'm talking extreme right wing viewpoint, which some people still hold and make it clear.
Yeah, for me, it's shocking though that you're going to hold that viewpoint and then support a football team, which let's face it, is maybe at least half the team is black. I find these two things really hard to marry. How this group of people can show up in a stadium, sing those songs, have those views, while those people are toiling on the field on their behalf. It's horrible. And it wasn't the only act of racism that marred British sports or English sports on Wednesday this week, was it? There was a debut for Ollie Robinson, a cricketer at Lord's, which was completely overshadowed by some old tweets he'd sent.
And the ECB announced that they would be investigating Robinson, and they need to assess what sort of punishment to impose on him, if any. We have seen a precedent, say, in football from the Football Association. They did impose a 4-match ban on Andre Gray in 2016 over homophobic tweets from 4 years earlier. So something now that the ECB has to assess, and obviously there was that apology on Wednesday.
Yeah, well, he struggled to read a prepared statement. It didn't feel very authentic, the apology, and he did seem obviously shocked by it. He got 4 wickets in his debut at Lords. I mean, it doesn't get better than that if you're a cricketer. And he obviously was gutted about it. But I don't know. There aren't any minorities in the current 11 that he's playing in at the moment this week at Lords. But the England cricket team, for in recent times, always had quite a diverse group playing for it. You know, if you're one of those players from who isn't white, you might feel uncomfortable sharing a dressing room with this guy.
Let's take a listen now to Ollie Robinson's apology after the first day of the first test against New Zealand at Lords on Wednesday.
On the biggest day of my career so far, I'm embarrassed by the racist and sexist tweets that I posted over 8 years ago, which have today become public. I want to make it clear that I'm not racist and I'm not sexist. I deeply regret my actions and I'm ashamed of making such remarks. I was thoughtless and irresponsible, and regardless of my state of mind at the time, my actions were inexcusable. Since that period, I've matured as a person and fully regret the tweets. Today should be about my efforts on the field and the pride of making my test debut, but my thoughtless behaviour in the past has tarnished this. Over the past few years, I've worked hard to turn my life around. I've considerably matured as an adult.
When he sent these tweets, he was 18 years old. He was on the books at Yorkshire, and at the time, he was playing alongside Azim Rafiq, who has spoken out about the racism he's experienced at the club. And there's an independent inquiry going on into that. We're still waiting to hear what the outcome is. But if that was his views at the time, even if he's changed them now, then you can see what a big issue that was for Yorkshire cricket and in fact cricket generally. Robinson's not originally from Yorkshire, originally from Kent, but and some of the tweets he sent were to other sort of promising Kent cricketers. So it's something I think the ECB, Yorkshire, Kent, everybody can't close their eyes to this. They have to think, why are there these prejudices still being put forward by people actually involved in playing the sport, not just watching it?
And in terms of media planning, Rob, if you were the ECB, would you not have looked at the tweet social media profile of your latest cap as you hire players?
It's something they absolutely should be doing. You'd expect that they would be carrying out those checks. It's something that football clubs do, particularly ahead of transfers. They're checking the social media histories of players to prevent exactly the situations that we've seen with Ollie Robinson. And obviously he faced that difficult scenario of having to face the press conference after the first day of the test, and press conferences very much in the news this week at sporting events because of Naomi Osaka. We touched on last week's show when we got the first word from her that she was planning not to do any press conferences at the French Open. On Sunday, we then got the warning from the organisers that she faced being thrown out if she didn't speak to the media. Well, she took matters into her own hands on Monday when she announced she was withdrawing from the French Open. And then we did have a more conciliatory tone from the French Open in a statement with the other Grand Slams, suggesting that they would engage with her on the concerns that she has, particularly around the mental health impact as she sees it from the intensity of those press conference scenarios.
Well, I mean, there are contractual obligations that sports people have to sign up to. So if she decides she doesn't want to do it, she can't just opt out, because then you're breaching the terms of your playing contract. So, I think she didn't think it through properly. I think perhaps the organisers could have taken more of a sort of investigative stance beforehand, found out exactly what the issue was, and rather than just going public and announcing that they were going to take action against this. Actually, do a bit of deeper digging to find out what was behind it. But I don't think you can just say I'm not going to talk to the media because if everybody did that, then you wouldn't have sport coverage being what it is, and there's sports media pay a lot of money to these people.
Yeah, the question of access also raises its head. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of those press conferences, but sometimes they're the only occasion for journalists to be able to directly ask questions to an athlete or a sports administrator, or whatever, like without going through a public relations official or a sponsor or whatever. The access to these stars is getting more and more limited, and the opportunity to hold anyone to account. And it's not that you want to have a row or anything like that, but you do want to get a question asked sometimes in order to get a story written. It's becoming a trickier issue. Rob, how have you found this issue of access?
Well, it's interesting, just reflecting on the world of tennis, that just ahead of the 2012 London Olympics, Andy Murray was asked about his own personality, often obviously criticised bizarrely for not having one or being a bit dour. And he said, I laugh a lot, just not in front of you guys. The questions just are not that funny, which was a brilliant way of disarming this question that was attempting to undercut him.
Yeah, and it shows his personality there as well, I suppose. But yeah,
But I think actually the formats of some of these press conferences just aren't particularly helpful. I mean, and for tennis players, it's a very singular sport. They're having to do these press conferences every couple of days because they're playing so regularly, unlike a team occasion. And we're coming up to the Euros now, and we're going to get the managers having to constantly be giving press conferences. It's actually very hard for them to come up with something new to say, potentially after all these different pre-matches, post-matches, assuming things are going well, they would hope.
Yeah, but they're also on their own channels, aren't they, Rob? They've also got to do not only the press. There's a huge amount of work for these people, which is their own social channels, probably their sponsored channels, etc. They're probably exhausted. Like you're obviously playing your sports match, whatever sport you're playing, and the amount of media, I suppose, you have to do has grown exponentially. But a lot of it is on behalf of your own commercial interests, and that seems to be the way things are going.
And you don't want to put a foot wrong as well. The potential is, of course, that you accidentally say something which ends up getting you in trouble. Someone like Alex Ferguson always said that matches can often be won in the press conference too. So it's the tone you convey to the players. And talking about Manchester United, on Friday, the fans finally heard from Joel Glazer. It's only taken 16 years for the Glazers to engage in some way with the fans, and it's finally come about as a result of the collapse of the Super League, one of the pledges to engage in a way that, of course, they didn't before trying to be part of the breakaway. A couple of the key points from the meeting. We've just only got word from United and the Manchester United Supporters Trust. They're going to be offering some shares to fans that will have some of the same voting rights as those held by the Glazer family. Of course, the club is listed on the New York Stock Exchange, but without many of the shares having the power to be able to influence decision-making. Also, an investment. They have said they're going to accelerate investment in redeveloping Old Trafford, as well as spending on the training ground as well. Of course, Manchester United going through a 4-year trophy drought, having lost the Europa League final. They've not won the Premier League since 2013. So there is that pressure for the Glazers to spend some more on the squad. And from Musk, they've said that the devil is always in the detail, and they're cautious, but they do see it as potentially revolutionary, this idea of the share scheme. Well, of course, one of the teams they're competing against in European football and the big spenders at the moment is Paris Saint-Germain. And we discovered this week that from 2023-2024, they'll be playing in an 18-team French league. They're knocking out 2 of the sides, so they'll be on a par with the Bundesliga in terms of with 18 teams. So that will mean, as it stands now, they're going to relegate 4 teams in 2023 and only 2 will be promoted. Of course, it's something that actually the FA have often long hoped for, to reduce the size of the Premier League, to reduce some of the burden on the players all around, but that's going to be pretty hard to do. Turning to South America now, and some news about the Copa America.
What's happened to the Copa America?
Martyn,
you really have been enjoying the week off.
Martyn, while you've been away, what hasn't happened with the Copa America? There was a tug of war at the start of the week between the Argentine government and CONMEBOL over having fans inside the stadium or having empty stadiums because of a rise in COVID cases. By the middle of the week, Argentina essentially is stripped of the competition, and there isn't a host at all. And by the way, this competition was supposed to be jointly held between Argentina and Colombia. Last month, Colombia pulled out or were withdrawn because of civil unrest there. And 13 days before the biggest national team tournament in South America, one of the oldest tournaments in football, there was not a host. And there was speculation about it going to all sorts of places. Chile, the most vaccinated country in South America. Some rumors about the US, which was a non-starter, and obviously Qatar, because why not? Always Qatar. That came up. But in the end, stunning news that despite record COVID cases, pretty much a disaster zone, the tournament is moving to Brazil after Jair Bolsonaro, the president of Brazil, in many ways a COVID skeptic, despite the mounting death toll in his country. He's handled it horrifically. Put his hand up and agreed to host the tournament in Brazil, much to the consternation of the public over there.
Just take one day this week. We had 100,000 nearly new cases of coronavirus in Brazil and 2,500 deaths, and that was just on one day.
Remarkable.
South America is bidding for the 2030 World Cup jointly between Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, and Chile, I think. A four-way thing. I mean, this doesn't sound it's going to be the greatest sort of preparation for your bid presentation. The fact that the Copa America is sort of cancelled and rescheduled at such short notice, and then taken to a country which has one of the worst COVID problems in the world.
Yeah, and the players, some of the players don't want to play there either. Obviously, we've got the Euro started. We haven't had that sort of backlash from players we had in South America, among them Luis Suarez, who just won the league with Atletico Madrid. He loves playing for Uruguay, but he said this tournament shouldn't go ahead under the current circumstances. But like with anything in sports these days, it's being driven on by money. National federations feed off the revenue from tournaments like this. So, yeah, it's going to be played in four cities in Brazil with tens of millions of pounds going to the coffers of those national FAs.
Is it going to be in Manaus?
No, Martyn, it's not. It's not going to be held in Manaus, capital of the Amazonian region, famously where England lost their opening World Cup game to Italy, the 2014 World Cup, one of the white elephant venues, sadly. But it will be held at another one in Cuiabá, Mato Grosso state. That held World Cup games. That stadium's not really been used. It's going to be held in Guyana and Brasilia. Enormously expensive stadium there, which was used as a bus shelter after the tournament. Now it's going to be used for Copa America, and of course Rio de Janeiro, where the final is going to be held again at the Maracanã Stadium. No fans, of course.
A lot of managerial moves in Europe at the moment, but also some ownership talk as well. And Serie A has attracted particular interest to you because we thought the Lazio owner was going to have to sell one of his clubs.
Yeah,
but he's not.
Yeah, Claudio Lotito found himself in a bit of a strange position. He owns Lazio, but he also owns, through his family, I believe a son and a brother-in-law, Salernitana, who got promoted to Serie A. And according to local rules, you can't have that level of connection between two ownership groups. So they've given them until June the 25th to divest. Lotito, though, is digging his heels in. In Trump style, he's saying, well, why can't we put the team into a blind trust and let it and just leave it as that? But for Serie A, for the management there, it's hugely embarrassing. They're trying to project themselves as a serious league. They've had so many problems over the years. This is another one. And as far as people who run that league are concerned, it just is such a bad look if this guy ends up owning two teams in the same league.
Yes, talking about blind trust, I think you would have to take that trust blindly, and I can understand why many of the other clubs would not want that to happen, because the whole thing about not owning two clubs it's fairly obvious. When your two clubs play each other, then you can potentially influence the outcome. So that's why it's not allowed.
Well, they have a word for that in Serie A, in Italian football, for those games, the famous biscotti games. It's where you kind of work something out. Normally happens on the last day of the season. And funny enough, the team that is typically the one that needs the result gets it. Salernitana, Lazio, last day of the season, Zeeks, fancy it?
Yeah, I think Lazio might win that one.
Didn't the rules change actually involving ENIC, Tottenham's owners, over the multiple club ownership in the 1990s? The fact is they were acquiring shares in various clubs: Rangers, Slavia Prague, AK Athens, FC Basel, and Vincentia Calcio. And didn't they change the rules after that?
Yeah, those were UEFA rules. They said you can't have, and again for the same reasons Martyn alluded to, the same owner for multiple teams playing in the same competitions. And that rule we've seen recently with the Red Bull teams in Europe. One of them has had to change its name and kind of show that it has distanced itself from the other part of the ownership group. I'm still not clear how distant those teams are, but they have had to change the structure of ownership in order to meet UEFA's rules. But yeah, no, Italy is a total mess. They've had a meltdown with various TV contracts, etc., etc. Inter Milan, the team that won the league, hasn't paid its wages since January. It's in a financial meltdown, and now you have this. It doesn't really project a great image for one of Europe's big five leagues.
So some interesting news out of Africa this week. We've had one of the longest-serving female heads of the Football Association has announced that she's going to stand down. Tariq, you've interviewed her before. Tell us who this is and what's happening.
Yeah, Aisha Hansen. She's one of the few female football leaders, like you said. She's normally seen on the FIFA circuit, even before she was elected to the FIFA Council recently. She always has had kind of high hopes for higher office, and she sees herself more of an international football figure. Likes to be seen with the right people. You only need to look at her Instagram feed. There's always a picture with a famous footballer or a famous administrator on there. But what I found really interesting is the reason she gave for giving up the or not contesting the election for the Sierra Leone FA presidency, which she has never stood for. Actually, she's been there 8 years. There's never been an election, so she's never had to actually fight for it. And this would have been the first one she might have had to contest, and the chances are she may have lost. It's been a horrible 8 years there at Sierra Leone while she's been in charge. There's hardly been any football played as well for one reason or another. But yeah, the reason she gave, and I'm going to quote her here: "As a recently elected FIFA Council member, I'll be required to play a higher level and more active role as a global ambassador for football and for FIFA. My new role will require extensive global travelling and consequently increased demands on my time." Now, look, we've all been around the FIFA Council or the FIFA Exco as it used to be. That is one of the plumbous roles in global sport. You don't really do anything. Talking to one of the FIFA Council members the other day, I did ask us, what was the meeting like? And he said, short. How many people spoke? Very few. And for that, Martyn, as you know, you're remunerated enormously. Apart from the luxury travel and all the rest of it, you get $250,000 salary, and that's net of any taxes. I suppose maybe you might need a bit more time to spend all that money. Now you've got that role, because it was an amazing excuse to sort of leave the FA.
And it's very rare we actually see any evidence of what these council meetings produce, what's actually decided in them, what's already cooked up beforehand. Yes, they have, when groups like Europe have got together, a block of help to thwart or delay things like the introduction of a Club World Cup and things like that. But ultimately, there's no sign that big decisions are taken in the council. You've got the Bureau, which is the vice presidents of FIFA, who also meet separately. And how they earn this money is just not very clear, because also it's a prestigious role.
Why they earn this money is also not very clear.
The FIFA should end the payments to the FIFA Council members, because what it does is it creates a sort of a political battle to get in many countries to get these plum rolls. And when you have such huge rewards on offer for something doing very little, it just creates an opportunity for, at best, sort of dubious political alliances. At worst, puts temptation in the way of people to try and cut corners or do wrong things in order to either maintain their positions and their income from this, or to get that plum roll. I think FIFA should bring an end to it sooner rather than later, because and yes, pay them the per diems. It should be like the IOC, really. The IOC members don't get paid.
21 episodes in, we finally have the legend of sports news joining us, for whom we wouldn't maybe be doing this if he hadn't created Sports Agenda all those many years ago. Welcome to Sport Unlocked to Charlie Sale.
I'm delighted to join such an illustrious trio of my former colleagues. Honoured.
So, we have got you on to talk about your book. What's it called?
It's called The Covers Are Off, Civil War at Lord's, Mensch Publishing, available on Amazon, wisdom.com, and all good bookshops.
Where is it not available, Charlie?
MCC Lords, I'm afraid. Although it will be on sale at the Oval later when they open their retail shop.
What's more incredible is you're best known for the column over the years with small snippets of items filling those two columns, and here you've gone and written an entire book and on an iPad as well.
Actually, but it's funny enough, in some ways, though, writing small is harder than writing sort of 110,000 words, because if you've only got a small column, you've got to be very concise with what you say and still get the story across. It's quite easy when you've got loads of pages.
I mean, the MCC are most people view them as sort of rich businessmen, cricket sort of nerds, various sort of posh people. A, is that accurate? And B, is the book sort of raising any hackles in the MCC itself?
Well, yeah, absolutely. They put themselves in the emergency landing situation. They're refusing to answer any questions about it when journalists approach them. And hopefully, I think the book does. It sums up the sort of difficulty that the MCC have, being a private members club, and two, they look after the most famous cricket ground in the world now. Also have to host test matches, and it's a difficult balancing act, which they've done over the years by having this sort of committee system, and it's a very slow. It's like an ocean liner. Making it turn is very difficult. And they came up against this property developer who wants decisions on the day rather than like, we'll get back to you in 3 or 4 months' time. So what the tragedy is over the last 20 years, that both sides could have worked together in getting something which suited both of them, a scheme that the MCC could cope with. Bear in mind, this is not won't affect the actual ground, it's the nursery end. At the moment, it's what David Gow famously called a prison wall. If you walk down the Wellington Road, you see all developments. You see a hospital at one end of Lords and a hotel, the Danubius, at the other. The idea was to join both because the tunnels go from one to the other. And so you could have had a mixed residential, some operating theatres underground, which have been very useful for radiotherapy treatment. In fact, the Cleveland Hospital was a massive American private hospital practice. I think I've spent £1 billion on building a massive hospital near Buckingham Palace, and they wanted to get involved with the sort of these tunnels. But it's a big wasted opportunity. At the end of the day, it's up to the MCC members to decide that they're of a type, as you say, well, predominantly white, predominantly wealthy, and very middle class. I mean, the lack of diversity is not really acceptable, I don't think, in 2021, but they say they're changing that. I'm sure they will. But the pity of this is that this thing could have fast-forwarded sort of reforming the MCC, but unfortunately, the arcane committee system won the day.
Charlie, that bit between the hospital and the wall along Wellington Road, that's why there's been nothing there. I've often walked that long distance from the Danubius to the hospital there. Most cricket fans would walk from St John's Wood Station and the entrance there. So that's why there's just nothing there.
Well, no, because underneath that wall are these Victorian tunnels, which have been defunct since the beaching cuts in 1966, I think it was. And so, there's obviously a property developer like Charles Rifkin saw the development opportunity because the rest of the streets developed. And in fact, only today I saw a massive panoramic picture of the whole area. It looks bizarre that there's no development along that road. It's such a wasted opportunity. But again, the MCC over time, Gubby Allen, a famous cricketer, old cricketer who ruled the roost at Lords, he wanted to see the tree line in the St John's Wood Church garden from his chair in the committee room. That's why the Compton Edrich stands, the previous one, were a terrible shallow building. So Gubby could still see the trees. In fact, now I think they've gone the other way up. I think that the new Compton Edrich stands, which were used partially for the first time during the test this week, too big, too much. And what they've done, they've put the footprint back further. So the nursery ground, which during this argument, the MCC committee kept saying was sacrosanct, when our building's finished, we want to play cricket, the nursery ground, first class cricket rather than just being a practice area. But by moving the footprint of the Compton Edrich onto the nursery ground, it means eventually they'll have to go back to the prison wall with a boundary rope, which means that they've sort of basically stymied any hope of residential along that wall, a point which some of the MCC chiefs make in the book, that it was a tactical move.
You were one of the in many ways, one of the sort of original sports news people when you started with the Express and your column, and then you went to the Daily Mail. So you had a long and interesting career in sports news, which we all have now because we're all getting on a bit. But you were not quite as long as you. So just tell us a few of your highlights. What when you think back, your career highlights, the things you thought were the best stories or the most enjoyable trips.
Well, I think looking back, I think the best trip, in fact, was the 2006 World Cup, the fortnight with the Wags. That was just unbelievable because for the first time ever, and it'll never happen again, all the players' families were staying in the same hotel as most of the media. So just would not happen again. Some of the stories there were quite ridiculous. I remember on the first night, the late Neville, I didn't get on particularly well with him, and he was a sort of, before he started dancing on the tables himself in Baden-Baden, but he was a sort of self-appointed leader of the Wags. And I remember they were sitting in this horseshoe in the bar, and Neville was pointing me out and said, don't speak to that guy, he's trouble, avoid him at any cost. And so at the end of the night, I was just walking out minding my own business, and I got booed out by the Wags. So after that, my wife actually came out and was for one of the weekends during the tournament, and she was just sitting reading a book outside the hotel, and suddenly surrounded by the Neville family. I had no idea who she was. They kept slagging me off. Didn't know what to do, where to turn. No, there's so many stories about the that World Cup. There's another one. I just happened to be in the swimming pool with, just by chance, with Carly Zucker, who's one of the sort of chief Wags. I think she was Joe Cole's girlfriend. And we were swimming up and down. And at the end of one lane, she said to me, "Doesn't this pool smell of urine?" She said another word. She said, "Doesn't this pool smell of urine?" So I said, "Yeah," because basically it'd been a player's day off, and all the kids had been in the swimming pool. So I sort of agreed. Thought nothing more about it. I was telling our office that I was excited to be swimming with Carly Zucker in the swimming pool, and she said this, whatever about it, the pool smelling of urine. And I thought nothing more. Then 2 days later, I got a call from my sports editor who said, "I hear there's been a complaint about you urinating in the swimming pool." So I said, "No, not exactly, no, but that's how sports news works. It's like things happen like that."
From that to swimming in Blatter's waters.
Well, absolutely. I wasn't happy about that either.
That was in Morocco.
Oh yeah, who was that guy? It was
Tom Peck.
Tom Peck.
Tom Peck. Yeah, I wasn't pleased about that. He said he on this big thing and said because the Daily Mail were staying at it wasn't a particularly nice hotel, but it certainly wasn't Blatter's hotel. And he wrote this piece saying only the Mail swimming. I think one of you two told me about it, so I wasn't too happy. I went round and had a word with Mr. Peck. No, but I mean, London 2012 was, the highlight for all of us, I think. In fact, the thing when I fell out with one of the sponsors, so I wasn't allowed into one of these hospitality areas. So in fact, I think it was Martyn who pretended to be me. He had a flat cap on. He said Charlie Sale, and then I pretended to be him. So we all got in. We were enjoying the hospitality there. And they said, "He's in the building. He's in the building." So Harvard School. So I was ceremoniously marched out. A fantastic sports news team also sort of thought if I go, we all go. So we all ended up in the Thai restaurant down the road, which is nice food anyway. I think one person whose name will be anonymous stayed behind saying, I'm not leaving this for something like Charlie Sale.
But then 4 years later in Rio, we did end up in their quite nice spot by Ipanema Beach, I think.
What was that? Was that you turned up?
You were allowed in 4 years later to Omega House. No, and you did write about it.
No, we went. I was invited to this. I was told this is a fantastic evening. Really posh, whatever. Make sure you wear a suit, and it'll be the best night of the Rio. I went with Jeff Powell. Okay, so I turned up. I wore a jacket. I'm looking forward to a really decent meal, and they said the host wasn't there, and then they suddenly turned up with a shambolic Harris. Wasn't wearing a suit, still working on his laptop. I think it was Harris who had most of the food, as far as I can remember that night. But no, plenty of memories. And it was with Tariq in, I think it was back in Rio, when there was a fallout with one of the FIFA guys who didn't like something I'd written or said to him. And I needed Tariq to interpret he speaks fluent Spanish, so he helped me out of a hole that night. I know plenty of memories, but it's the people you miss or you remember, not necessarily the stories.
Charlie, how would you have coped? We've had a year on Zoom, stuck at home. How would you have managed? You've been out and about. You've met a lot of people on the road. How would you have found all of that?
Not well at all. I think it's the great thing about our job is going out and about and talking to people. I mean, it must have been terrible. I mean, I feel bad for you lot having to work just on Zoom. It's so sterile, isn't it? You can't. I mean, all three of us like having the other chat, don't we? We got the backup chat. I mean, the press conference itself, it's the afters that matter. Even Ziggs was the master of the afters, So is Paul Kelso, another guy who's left the sports news business. But it must have been possible. But then again, it does show the good journalists, because if you didn't have any contacts during this last year, you wouldn't get very far. You're not making new contacts, are you? You have to do everything on the thing. But very difficult. I think you've all done remarkably well in that respect. So sort of keep going, but not having the excitement of trips and occasions is, that's the best memories, isn't it?
Charlie, obviously you're sort of notorious for giving PR people a hard time. So you must be fairly gratified that they held a leaving dinner in your honour. And when they turned up, they were all wearing Charlie Sale face masks.
Yeah, I mean, that was organised by Joanna Manning Cooper, who's a brilliant PR person. No, I was very lucky. I was very lucky with what people said when I retired. I feel humble about all that. But talking about PR, just day Ollie Robinson, the first day of the Lord's Test. And what on earth were the MCC communications people doing? It's just unbelievable in this day of social media that came out on the first day of the MCC test. Heads must roll at that. It's an absolute joke, isn't it? I mean, it's completely wrecked that's taken the agenda away from the test match and the sort of good news story they think with the Compton and Edric stand. The ECB, absolutely, yeah, probably. Probably the MCC are furious with the ECB that their first day has been hijacked in that way. But what's surely you got a new player in the sort of setup, whatever team it is, Premier League, whatever, football, cricket, rugby. You look into his background and try and cut that off the pass. And if there is something unfortunate, and it will be a common theme, will it? Because although this guy was 18 when he made the comments, I mean, but we all say stupid things in our youth, but they should have sorted that before his first match.
And Naomi Osaka this week as well, saying that she wouldn't do press conferences, threatened with being banned by the French Open, threats out, and now withdrawing herself.
Oh, I mean, that's an astonishing story, isn't it? I mean, I think my sympathies are with the organisers over this very, very rich lady who doesn't like press conferences. But surely she realised. I mean, it's not as if those press conferences are hard work, So we've all been to Wimbledon, the most sanitised, easy questions you could possibly get. And there's somebody guy sitting in. It's not like the Rottweilers we can be occasionally. It's really easy stuff. And you've got to do it. You can't have it one way and not the other. If you're earning this amount of money, sponsors, whatever, makes the circus go round. Yeah. No, all the three guys who do this sensational podcast are all good at answering questions, or not answering questions, posing questions and holding people to account. That's what we do. So it'll be very interesting how the sort of the mood changed on that story, doing the tennis story. Like the first day everyone was sympathetic. The next day everybody was sympathetic with her.
Charlie, been great having you on the podcast. Interesting to hear about your first book. I hear the film rights are up for grabs for any Hollywood moguls listening in. And anyway, we'll keep listening.
Well, great you could join us. I mean, for so many years you'd say that people would expire in terms of their period of relevancy after about a couple of years. So would you now call yourself irrelevant?
Fair question. Absolutely, yeah. Totally irrelevant. Actually, funny enough, I bumped into somebody, I won't say who, one of the Sky pundits today, and I thought, 2 years ago, if you'd seen me, he would definitely come up and try and make conversation, keep my good books. This time he looked at me, he didn't even bother acknowledging me, he just walked on. Probably thought that bloke's irrelevant now. I'll swerve him. But I saw him and I'll have him.
You'll find a way.
I'll find a way, yeah. I still have outlets.
Bit of reminiscing now. Great to hear some thoughts from Charlie, wasn't it?
Yeah, he looked in great. He was in good form as well, Ziggs, wasn't he? He looked a picture of health. He had his day at Lord's. I mean, hopefully that's what's awaiting all of us in a few years' time.
It's boasting the sort of town you only get from hours on the competitive croquet field where he now spends much of his time.
Great chatting as always.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a less hectic week, but nonetheless, I've really enjoyed this podcast. Really interesting, and casting our net a bit wider than perhaps we have. Not talking about Tokyo, not talking about the Super League. So all the better for that.
And let's hope you haven't just jinxed it, and this is the version that actually does go out, and there is no breaking news. That means we have to re-record it. We should tell everyone when we do actually end up re-recording it, someone can listen to the unpublished versions that we've had to do in some of these previous 20 episodes. But really grateful for all your feedback as ever. We can be found at Sport Unlocked on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. Also, sportunlockedpod@gmail.com. Any questions you've got. But for now, if you can rate, review and subscribe to us on whichever platform you're listening to us on, that would be absolutely great. And enjoy the sports viewing in the days ahead. Goodbye for now.